This is the MXR Rockman X100, the long-awaited follow-up to the original Rockman X100. I have both units, an original unit and the brand new Rockman X100 unit. I'm going to compare them head to head, explain how they work, give you lots of sound examples, as well as some ideas about how you might be able to use this kind of device. Now, I've got it set up in this video so that I can switch between the two. So I'm going to explain the setup. When I have this radio, which controls the input of my guitar, when it's on this green, then I'm on the Rockman X100 pedal. And then when I hit this, it shifts the input between the two different units. The feature set's a little bit different. I will be going over how they are different and how they're similar. You'll be able to hear if they sound the same or not. So let's get started with an example of the clean sound. The clean 2 sound is what you get when you first start this up. I've got the chorus enabled on here. So that was an initial example listening to the 2 units. Now the original unit had an echo, which isn't a feature of the new one, so I have that turned off on here. Also in the original, there was no direct way to disable both the echo and the chorus, so the chorus is always on. I'll explain a little bit more about that a little bit later on in the video, but on the new unit you can turn the chorusing on and off. The way this chorusing works on both is you can see that it's blinking, and it's blinking at ½ hertz, meaning that'll blink every 2 seconds. It did the same on the original. The clock circuit for the chorus on the original is actually, this LED is part of the actual circuit. I don't know how it's implemented here, but you can see that it stays on all the time, and then it gets brighter as it flips through. I believe it's some kind of a triangle or sawtooth waveform because it's got a little bit of a disconnect, like it ramps up and then it shifts down, something like that. Anyway, it's a very long or very slow LFO on that chorus, which is part of this sound. The other thing about the chorus is that if you wire it up correctly, you'll have the dry signal on the left and the wet signal or the chorus modulated delay on the right. A chorus is a delay that might be somewhere from around 20 or 30 or maybe 15 to 35 milliseconds, and it's modulating. You know, it's going up and down in delay, and that's what gives you that wide sound. If you want to do that without a Rockman pedal, something like a Boss CE2 operates in a very similar way. So if you want to simulate that with pedals, or if you want to simulate it in your modeler, then put in something that's similar to a Boss CE2 to get this kind of sound where you've got the left and the right, where the left is dry and the right is the chorus modulated signal. Now, I am doing this entirely with no guitar amps. I'm running direct from the MXR into this Onyx 8 mixer, and it's panned hard left and right. Actually, this one is going into stereo channel 3/4 on here. That way I can add a little EQ to it if I need to. I found that the new pedal, compared to my Rockman, is a little bit darker. So I've added just a little top end on here. So let's compare that. Here's the original unit. And it's still a little bit darker. I've added the 12K hertz from the typical Mackie type EQ and a touch of 2.5K to try to equal them out. Still, the older unit's brighter. My unit has been fully serviced and new capacitors and everything, so I think it sounds pretty close to the way it would have originally. it's really tricky, but important to try to get them at the same volume. Let me play something else here. One thing that's really important about this is that the compressor adds a lot of sustain. It's got a slow attack and a slow release. Sometimes with compressors, you use the compressor to get a snap, like if you're playing country, but this isn't like that. This is adding a lot of sustain. And I think it might be because Tom Scholz originally was playing the Hammond organ a lot. And organ has infinite sustain. And this gives you that kind of quality to it. And it's one of the reasons that this is so inspiring. I think that it rewards you for having a light touch. If you smack it, then you can actually hear the compressor kick in. And some people don't like these circuits because of the fact that they sound kind of thin or harsh, and they do, the more you wail on it. So, but if you play lightly, it's really fun because you've got a tremendous amount of sustain. This new unit has the advantage of being quite a bit quieter, I think, in terms of the way the circuit's implemented. And it's also very easy to power up with this nice, typical 9-volt pedal input. The old one requires a dual mode power supply that has +6 and -6. Not that easy to come by, those power supplies, or you have to load it up with 8 AA batteries. So there's a great deal of convenience on the new one. The other thing about the new one that it does have is the ability to sequence through the 4 sounds using a foot switch. And I've tried this out. A momentary foot switch will work and allow you to increment through these. It also has the volume control, which is the output volume. You did have that on the original here, and that's on this slider. It gives you 3 positions. Most people always keep it in the max position. The input gain on the original was on this little gain trim pot on the back, and it's actually very touchy and inconvenient to use it. And so it's nice to see that that's been brought out into a much nicer slider. Kind of reminiscent of the Rockman Rock Module Rack units, these two here. But there's a nice feel to that. I think this is really nicely implemented and very well designed. My understanding is that Bobby Cedro, who worked at Scholz Research and Development designing many of the other products and the rack products, still works at Dunlop and did the design on this MXR pedal. So that is a little background on that. There is a switch. If you open this up, there's a switch inside to allow it to do stereo operation. And to do stereo operation, you also need a TRS-Y cable coming out of the output. If you just plug in without that, then you'll get it in mono. I feel like you're really not getting much advantage from using this device if you're running it in mono. The real fun and inspiration comes from running it in stereo. You could run it into 2 amps for the most part. I really like to just run them direct, record left and right, and then use left and right in some creative ways when mixing. That's the famous Clean 2. Let's listen to Clean 1 sound, which is the more mid-rangey version of it. Do the slider here. I'm gonna put this into the hotter pickup mode. So another thing about the setup that I'm using for these examples is because there's no echo on this unit, I've got a little bit of echo coming through the Onyx 8 mixer. So that is how I'm getting the echo. That comes into this channel here on effects, and I can mute it with a foot switch. So if I turn that off, it's much more dry. It's really more of a slap. So it's not a really strong echo, kind of like the original, but I'm going to play that for you so you get an idea of how that sounded. So if I put this switch in the middle, I'll have both chorus and echo. So that is a very typical Rockman kind of sound with that echo. It's a little boingy, but it has a ducking gate in it. So when you first start to play it, it ducks down, holds the delay off, and then it goes into what's really a multi-tap delay, which acts like a kind of a primitive analog reverb. I like that echo, and you'll hear it in a variety of songs and hit songs, the use of that. But it's not in here, but that does give the opportunity for, in the future, maybe Dunlop can release a pedal that does have some sort of echo in there. It would need to be recreated digitally or maybe something even a little bit nicer. But with that kind of slap plus a reverb, or a reverb with a pre-delay, is kind of what that sound is like. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this back off and put the board echo back on. So both of them will have that. So then the edge setting kicks in the distortion. So that is the really tight, very mid-rangey sound. There's not much bass to it. This won't give you much in the way of a chugging kind of sound. Let's go turn the chorus off so you can hear that with the low notes. It's not tight and full on the lowest notes, and certainly if you play a 7-string guitar and you have even lower notes, it's not that satisfying. But what is satisfying is that this sound will mix in really well with other instruments. And it seems tuned to play power chords really nicely, particularly in A, E, D, common rock chord keys. Let's hear it compared to the original. And you can't turn the chorus off, so we'll compare this to the chorus. Now there's a volume difference. The volume's not equal when you're playing through the original. It drops off as you switch tones, so I have to make a little adjustment. That's the original. So they are very similar on this sound. Now you can turn the volume control down on the edge sound, and you can find the edge. Let's do it on this one with the chorus off. And it's a little more versatile. And then if we go full out here. All right, so I'm going to stop playing for a second and just explain something about this sound. So this is what's happening inside of a Rockman device. Your guitar comes into the compressor, which acts to add a lot of sustain. It's fixed, there's no controls on it, but you can adjust the input gain, and that has an effect on how much compression you get. Usually you're going to adjust that based on the kind of guitar you're using. And then it goes into the different voice settings. So distortion, edge, and clean can be switched, but they all go through a filter, which in the Rockman patent is called the complex filter. And it is a kind of an analog series of EQ that creates what you might be as like a primitive IR or impulse response. It simulates a speaker or guitar cabinet in the most primitive way. But basically it makes it extremely, extremely mid-rangey when it comes through that. The difference between edge and distortion isn't that much other than that there's a boost of the gain coming into the distortion, which is a simple clipping distortion circuit. Different Rockmans do it with different kinds of diodes. Some of them use LEDs and some of them use ordinary diodes, but nonetheless, it's a fairly simple circuit, and that's the difference. The clean one isn't distorting, edge and DIST are distorting. They go into this filter, which rolls off and shapes it to be sort of like the output of a speaker cabinet. Clean 2, which is the bright sound, goes through the compressor, and then it goes through its own EQ that gives it that bright. It's got a little more bottom end and a little more open top end. It doesn't go through all of this band limiting, and so you get something that sounds like running direct into a board. So if you wanted to simulate this, you can use Studio Gear, come into maybe something like an 1176, and then do some EQ to get a simulated acoustic, take a little bit of mid-range out and add a little top into it. So all of this happens before the effects. So this is set up like a mix or like a sound in the studio, not like a typical, at least at the time in the 70s when this was inspired. It's basically trying to get for a practice setup or songwriting setup to get a fully produced sound. So following this, it goes into your chorus. If chorus is engaged, the left signal is your dry signal entirely, and the right signal is delayed and modulated, giving you that stereo width. It's also important to know that the effects are in parallel on here. It's not a chain. So it also goes into the stereo echo, which has multi-taps coming left and right, going off to both sides. Now the new unit doesn't have this piece. So this is on the original unit. The new one just does this. And this chorus topology, where you've got dry on the left and wet on the right, I would say is similar to what you would have in a Boss CE2 pedal, and it is also reproduced this way in the Gallien-Kruger ML250 amps, which were very much inspired by the same thing. And I think a Roland JC120 might have a similar chorus to this as well. So that is what's going on inside of a Rockman unit. Now, one thing before we're done, and I think you've heard most of the sounds of this, is to explain that if you're using the original unit or the new unit, you can kind of control the chorus depth in mono by mixing the left and right together differently. So I'm going to go to the original unit here. Now, you can't turn the chorus off, but if you think about what I just explained, where the right side is the chorus side and the left side for the most part is the dry signal, if we forget about the right side and just pan the left side to the middle, this is how you can get almost dry sound from an original Rockman with no modifications. Just take the left side of the signal, and if I turn the board echo off, you've got a straight dry sound. It's not 100%. There is a little bit of that chorus still in there. Now, if you take the other side, and we're going to run in mono, so you can blend in different amounts of that chorus. So from almost no chorus to very chorus phasey. So here is another trick, is you can just use the chorus side by itself to get a kind of a wobble or wow and flutter effect. Same thing works on the new unit. I just don't have it into a channel where I can control left and right separately on this board, but hopefully that will inspire you that you can get some different sounds out of these by just some experimenting, particularly if you know how they work. It also, I think, is informative if you're trying to model these kinds of effects, to really focus on doing parallel effects instead of chains. So people will often say this is the sound of the 80s, and from all kinds of things. Like if you listen to the main riff in Danger Zone from Top Gun, almost verbatim. If you listen to the solos for Sharp Dressed Man and other things off of Eliminator with ZZ Top, you'll hear this sound in there. And Surfing with the Alien, this is in there. Now, of course, in all of those cases with Def Leppard, they're running into all of the resources they have of running into studio gear. So they're doing post EQ and many times emphasizing using better quality reverbs along with the Rockman. So it's a very interesting thing. So if you're trying to get the Boston lead tone that's used for all the harmony parts, if you ever get a chance to listen to the multi-tracks, you can hear that they're highly band limited, and it sounds to me like it's going through a wah pedal or the cocked wah, fixed wah position. So I'm going to put this back to the new unit here. And so if we play something kind of Boston-y, like, so that sounds okay. It sounds a little bit like Boston. On the first record, he wasn't using a lot of chorusing that I ever could really hear on there. Most of the things were actually double tracked, played twice. And in addition to that, they were played, I think, with a wah in front of it. So what this Nova wah does is it basically has the wah circuit but with a knob, and there's two of them on here. And sometimes even the rhythm parts are played with this sound. And so if you put the wah in front of your Rockman pedal, then you can play around with this kind of sound. So I think that's a lot of fun. Of course, you can tune that, maybe open it up a little bit more. So those are a few tips on how to use the Rockman when you're recording. You can use it direct, add some EQ after it, add a wah in front of it, isolate the left and right channels, and try using one or the other or blending the two of them, and generally just be inspired. All the sounds from here add or can be used very well to add something to what mix of whatever style of music you're doing. And I'm really pleased to see that Dunlop has put this out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video very soon.